Now, the Three Martini Lunch with Greg Corombos and Jim Geraghty.
Actually, not today. Today it is Chad Benson in for Greg Corombos, and Jim Geraghty's got to fill in as well. David French joins us, and good to talk to you, my man. And I heard what you're writing your new piece on, what you just talked about, and I can't wait to read it because it is it drives me crazy, all this stuff that's happening out there. It's summertime. Am I right, David? It's supposed to be quiet, and it's not quiet this summer because it's never quiet with Trump. And let's start with the good. And you think that something may happen out of all of this mess that was this self-inflicted craziness of a family separation?
Yeah, I don't want to speak too soon. And probably as soon as I say these words, they will crumble away. They will drift away like ashes in the wind. But it looks like there's a possibility, maybe, perhaps, that Congress might actually assert some constitutional authority and restore some sanity, at least to the family separation side of the immigration debate, and put in place a policy, which actually was the policy that none other than the Obama administration wanted to pursue, which is hold families together while asylum claims and while any criminal unlawful entry claims are being processed. In other words, try to overturn a consent decree and a Ninth Circuit decision, a consent decree from the Clinton administration, a Ninth Circuit decision from the Obama administration that said you got to release kids after 20 days, which puts you in a bind if a family comes in and you want to hold them while their asylum claim is processing. Then you got to let their kids go after 20 days. You have no option right now. So it looks like there's a possibility that the House and Senate might vote on bills as early as today that will restore some sanity. And especially after the executive order yesterday, I think the Trump administration, Trump will sign it, and we might actually do something legislatively to deal with a problem. And that's a breath of fresh air because I don't know about you, I'm getting sick of the ever-increasing imperial executive, which means that every single policy fight in the U.S. anymore is a policy fight at the presidential level.
Yeah, we were joking about earlier. It's summertime. Summertime's usually quiet, and the reality is with this president, nothing is quiet, and everything seems to be a fight. And at some point in time, I think everybody needs to come up for, a quick breath and take a look around and say, can we do this as adults? Because I feel like we've lost civility, and I feel like the adults have left the room at times, and it's driving me crazy, and it doesn't matter what the issue is anymore.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, everything is an emergency. Everything is a crisis. And look, I get it on the family separation issue. I didn't like family separation. I wrote that Congress should do something about family separation. That's serious, but we do get to this point where if something is moderate, it's treated as if it's serious. If something is serious, it's treated as if it's a crisis. And I mean, we're really reaching a point where we cannot maintain any perspective at all.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And that brings us to, as you just talked about, how it's ramped up. We go to the bad martini, and you look at this and the open border policy, the left, I'm not, we've always known, anybody who's intelligent, anybody who's common sense realize what the left is doing. But the reality is we can't be everything to everybody in the world. And while one group, you can look at and says, this is ridiculous. We're going to need some immigration. We're going to need tougher immigration policy, but we also need to make it easier for people to get here. The other side, they just want votes, and they're willing to say, hey, anybody who's got any kind of issue or just wants to come here, come on in.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting to me is initially the argument was, well, we can't have family separation. We cannot have family separation. Okay, so then you deal with family separation. Trump ended the family separation policy by executive order, which he had the power. The way he did it, he had the power to do it. And then they said, well, no, now we can't have family detention. What? Okay, so you have to do catch and release, or you're some sort of moral monster. So then I guarantee you, once you do no family detention, you do catch and release. Then when they come back for their court date or their immigration proceedings, they'll say, well, look, ever since you did the catch and release and they've been out in society, they've been doing great things. And oh, by the way, their kids are dreamers. You don't want to separate this family when you've got these kids who are dreamers. And so it just step by step by step by step, you end up with no control at all.
I like the optimism you have there with when they show up for their court date, because as we all know, that is a big if, because why would you show up?
I do like to be wildly optimistic on occasion. But yeah, if you look at the statistics about, anywhere between 75 and 60% of people will show up later, about 30 to 25 hovers between 25 to 40% will not, which is pretty bad. But yeah, those who do show up, then the argument is, well, look, I mean, they've got dreamer kids, they've gotten a job. Who wants to put them out of the country? And what you essentially end up having is just this step by step by step. The border doesn't really matter anymore. American law doesn't really matter anymore.
Well, if American law doesn't matter, do we have to pay our taxes? That should be the whole thing. If it doesn't matter, why do we get to pick and choose? Maybe I don't want to choose to pay this tax. I don't know. We move from there.
The funny thing was, we were beginning to see some rhetoric along the lines that said, hey, look, we shouldn't do any family detention because these families are not public safety risks. Well, Paul Manafort's not a public safety risk, but I don't hear a lot of people on the left side of the Twitter world saying, get Paul Manafort out of prison. If I decide to stop paying my taxes, and by the way, you just heard some bonus commentary by the new French puppy, a Labradoodle named Boo. If I stop paying my taxes, or if I commit white collar crime, I'm not a public safety risk. But would Chris Hayes say I shouldn't be in prison or I shouldn't be detained? I mean, that's this where can we not have a reasonable conversation about whether, when somebody comes into this country unlawfully, before we put them into the larger society, shouldn't we adjudicate whether their presence is permissible or not? Can we not do that? And I don't think it is a monstrous view to take the position that you should adjudicate before you release into the larger society, so long as that adjudication takes place on a timely basis.
Maybe Paul Manafort should have had his kids crying somewhere in the back of a car.
Well, yeah, that would.
God, we got to totally help that guy out. We don't want to separate him. Now, speaking, as we stay on this and the craziness of that, just as that joke aside, the reality is the hysteria over this. So many times I heard the likes of Pelosi and Feinstein come so close to saying concentration camps and things of that nature. The Nazi comparisons, as if Mengele was standing there saying, you goes over to the right and your family goes to the left. And then away they went to the showers. It was hysteria. But it gets the sound bites that they want. And that's really all they care about. They don't care if they're right or wrong. They care about whether enough microphones catching me.
Well, here's the thing. Number one, 90% of the people who are making the Nazi comparison, if you called them on it, what they would immediately do is retreat. And they would say, well, no, obviously I'm not saying this is Auschwitz now. What I'm saying is this is 1935 or this is 1936, as if that's the path that we're on, which is absurd. I mean, it's ridiculous. We're not on that path at all. And it was absurd and ridiculous when I heard conservatives make that argument about the Obama administration. The United States is not drifting in a Nazi direction. And the next person who says it should be disqualified, or at least maybe put in timeout for 72 hours from any other public commentary. It's ridiculous. But, here's the other thing. A lot of these people who are being so alarmist, they knew they were being alarmist, but what they were doing was stoking genuine outrage in the public. So the public doesn't know that what's happening is there's being a kind of a game played here, that it's like a WWE exercise where somebody's got the microphone and they're like, I'm coming for you, Hulk Hogan. I'm coming for you. You're the worst man in the world, and it's all kind of a game designed to stoke outrage. But the outrage they stoke, even if they don't truly believe, like we're looking at Auschwitz, we're staring at Auschwitz, the outrage they end up stoking tends to be real. And it's one of the reasons why America is becoming increasingly negatively polarized, is we're just making these unbelievably over-the-top arguments all the time. I was on MSNBC the other day, and the question of the day was, are we in a constitutional crisis? It's like, wait a minute, at most it's a political crisis just because everyone's losing their mind, but nobody's violated any court orders. Nobody's violated, defied the Supreme Court like Andrew Jackson did. We got to dial this back a little bit, because it's what we are actually doing is a whole lot of people who know better and who believe things differently are stoking up the public in a way that's very real and very and causes people great angst. It's funny, and I'm sure you've seen this a million times. You'll have two people on television and they're going at it. I mean, they are going at it as if they are debating. Each one of them is debating the most evil person in the world. Cameras go off. They walk into the green room. They have a cup of coffee. They laugh. They joke. They ask about each other's kids, because what they were doing was putting on something for TV. But the people at home, all they see is the fight. They don't see the cup of coffee. And so it just keeps stoking and stoking and stoking this public outrage. And here we are.
We have turned politics into WWE, and we as a nation, we live for reality TV. We don't care about the person going through the mundane part of life. We want to see people in weird positions who do crazy things and then argue about it. That's just it. I mean, we could have a reality show called People Just Arguing, and it would be the biggest show. And that's all this is. This is the WWE. And it's sad, David, that we're at this point. And the problem is people don't understand that it's not real. And that's the issue. As bad it is the politicians do it, my fear is there's a group at large in our country who take it as gospel and real, and they overreact, and that is the issue we're having.
Oh, totally. I think people would be stunned, just stunned, how often somebody appears as a talking head on television and looks into the camera and very aggressively says something they actually don't believe, because, well, it's important for them to say it for their career, or it's important for their larger, tribal political affiliation, that if they dissent or they disagree with or say their real beliefs, they won't get invited back, or they'll be, ostracized within their caucus. I mean, this kind of stuff, it happens all the time. And there's no warning sign. There's no warning symbol under words. Warning, this congressman is saying something he doesn't believe, or warning, this pundit is very aggressively taking a position he didn't know he had until he was handed the show notes 15 minutes ago. and you're just like, yeah, but again, it's the public has no idea about this. And two things happen. I think one thing that happens, and both of them are negative. You have a lot of people who are sort of otherwise sensible, who've got, lots of things working, doing them with their kids and with their jobs. And they're just going to kind of tune it all out, because it just becomes background noise. It becomes sort of like a screaming background noise, and they don't want it in their lives. So they tune it out and they disengage. And then the other thing that happens for those people who are deeply engaged, those who really, really care about public policy, it just radicalizes them all the time. They just steadily and increasingly grow more and more radical. And the data is out there for this. The data shows that both left and right are moving further away from each other faster than any time since Pew has been measuring these statistics. And so in the Obama administration, it was the right moving more away from the left. In the Trump administration, it's the left moving more away from the right. And here we are. Again, we're in a world that we've created, that sort of the punditocracy and the political class has created. And it's a world that they don't even really fully live in. I think people would actually be surprised at the level of day-to-day civility on Capitol Hill, given what they see on television.
That's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. 3 Martini Lunch here today. David French from the National Review. Let's throw Olive on this. One quick thing. NBA draft, David, who do you have?
NBA draft. So, I am focused I'm maniacally focused on my Memphis Grizzlies, who tanked like champions
and
this
nobody
last
wants to
year.
play there.
And I can't remember if at one point they lost 20 straight games. I mean, you got to hand it to my Grizzlies. They will end a multi-year playoff run with style. And so, unfortunately, however, even though they had high chance to get the first pick in the draft and a very high chance to be in the top 3 of the draft, they ended with the 4th pick. Fortunately, this draft is about 5 or 6 players deep before you get to a pretty decent drop-off in talent. Unfortunately, I keep hearing that the Grizzlies are wanting to trade the pick to shed Chandler Parsons' contract. But we have just talked more Memphis Grizzlies than probably all but maybe 3 listeners want to hear.
That's okay. It's the NBA draft. Look, I'm in Phoenix right now, the station that I'm out here where I broadcast from. They are the home of the Suns. It's a big day. Who are they going to take, Ayton, or are they going to take Doncic? I think they're going to take the kid from Europe because that's the best player in this draft. But it is funny, and I know I was reading out your Twitter that you love your Grizzlies, and nobody wants to play with the Grizzlies or the Kings. So it's going to be a tough situation out there, but it should be fun. 3 Martini Lunch. Dave French in today for Jim Geraghty, and, of course, I'm in for Greg Corombos. My name's Chad Benson. Appreciate you. We'll do this again tomorrow, David. Sound like fun?
Yeah, sounds great. And by the way, I'm going to tell you, your Suns are going to take Ayton. They're going to take Ayton.
I know, it's awful. It's awful.
No, they're going to do it. No. He's too much of a raw talent. Doncic is more NBA ready, but they're going to take Ayton. I'm already seeing jerseys printed. They're taking him.
Yeah, there's jerseys. Trust me, there's plenty of jerseys around here, that's for sure.
Exactly.
That there, kids, is your 3 Martini Lunch. Go enjoy the rest of your day.